Hello again, Thoreau fans. Corinne Smith here with a review of the new Thoreau-related books that came out in the year 2024, or at least they came to my attention this year. Now, you might say, gee, Henry's been gone for like what, a century and a half? Are people still really writing about him? Yes. Yes, they are. We have more than a dozen books to talk about here. Just for this year alone. Isn't that amazing? People are still being influenced and inspired by Henry David Thoreau. What would he say? You know, you're always in danger thinking about that. I think he'd be initially appalled, but maybe deep down he might feel honored, maybe even grateful, maybe. We conjecture. Anyway, that would be my hope, that he would be somehow honored to know that people are still thinking about him and writing about him and reading his books. Anyway, we have fiction titles, a quote book, a couple of following in his footsteps kinds of books, and a bunch of volumes of literary analysis, so stay tuned. Let's start with fiction and with two books written by Canadian authors. First one is Followed by a Lark by Helen Humphreys, who lives in Ontario. This is a quiet, fictionalized retelling of Henry's life. I've read it. I think Helen did a pretty good job. Of course, there's always a few details I could pick over since I am a Thoreauvian and we always look for possible errors in writings about our hero. I think overall, though, this one is nicely done. And Helen picks up a thread in Thoreau's life that not many people pay enough attention to, and I think it could actually turn out to be the most important one. And that's all I'll say there. Followed by a Lark by Helen Humphreys. Amazingly enough, we have another Canadian publication to talk about. By the way, Cat Jackie Blue is playing with her jingle balls while I speak. She likes to do that. So if you hear jingle balls, that's Jackie running from one end of the kitchen to the other. Anyway, Canadian book, Lac le Matin by Louis Hamelin of Quebec. And yes, it's written in French. This one is a fictionalized retelling of Thoreau's time of living at Walden Pond. Louis expands upon what Thoreau told us in Walden that he did through his seasonal chapters. As you might expect, Henry here has more interactions with the French-Canadian woodsman Alex Therian than Thoreau told us about in Walden. And this is a very interesting development and speculation. I took just one semester of French at a local college a few years ago, so I could not read this one without retyping every paragraph into Google Translate. But I really wanted to read it, so that's what I did. And I like this book. I recommend it. Again, there's one tiny misstep that I could point out, but it's a minor one, and we can kind of forgive it because there are duplications of place names throughout New England, and it can be easy enough to get them confused. Nevertheless, Lac le Matin by Louis Hamelin. I hope you can read French. And Louis, thanks for the shout out and the acknowledgments. Now, a slightly tangential book of historical fiction to mention here is Finding Margaret Fuller by Allison Pataki. This is Margaret's life told in first person by Margaret herself. Now, readers who don't know anything about the Transcendentalists or don't know anything about Margaret Fuller will probably find this book to be compelling. They will certainly be surprised by the ending. This book got a lot of publicity when it came out. A lot of people read it. It's available in a lot of public libraries. However, if you are more knowledgeable in the arena of the Transcendentalists, then you will probably notice the liberties the author took right from the beginning. She plays around with the timelines of Thoreau and Ralph Waldo Emerson and the Alcott family. She admits that in her notes, that she deliberately did that to make the story easier to tell. You can be offended by this immediately, or you can suspend your disbelief and just keep on reading. So, If you know a lot already, I don't know. This is optional. Reader beware on this one. I think some folks will put it in the same category as Amy Belding Brown's book, Mr. Emerson's Wife, that came out in 2006. I actually think that one has some redeeming qualities. Finding Margaret Fuller is interesting, but if you really want to know about Margaret, go back and read Megan Marshall and John Madison's biographies of her. I mean, they're Pulitzer Prize winning authors for reasons. Okay? Finding Margaret Fuller. Moving on. We got a beautiful book this year. A Year of Birds. Writings on Birds from the Journal of Henry David Thoreau. Edited by Jeff Wisner. You should remember that Jeff already gave us Thoreau's Animals and companion volume, Thoreau's Wildflowers, although I've also already mentioned once, gee, Yale, it would have been nice if you'd made them the same size, but anyway, I digress. These are compilation quote books by subject category by Jeff Wisner. Now he gives us A Year of Birds, with an introduction by international bird expert, longtime Thoreau Society member, and shop employee Peter Alden, and beautiful, beautiful, beautiful watercolor illustrations by Barry Van Dusen. Of course, the pictures, the pages that I land on, don't have them. There you go. It's just an absolutely beautiful book for yourself or as a gift to someone else. Jeff has switched publishers to Mercer University Press, which is quickly becoming a Thoreau kind of press, thanks to Mark Jolly, the publisher, who is a member of the Thoreau Society and who comes to the annual gatherings and meets these authors, wouldn't you know. So for every day of the year here, we have a bird observation made by Henry, with beautiful illustrations and an introduction that puts it all into context. Did Henry ever see a cardinal? No, they didn't. They weren't here then, but there are a whole bunch of other ones. So, A Year of Birds, Jeff, Peter, and Barry, thank you very much. Okay, now we have 3 books that follow in Henry's footsteps. Up first is A Week on the Minnesota and Mississippi Rivers, Thoreau's 1861 Minnesota Journey Revisited by David R. Solheim. David and a companion paddled along these 2 rivers. They're the ones that Henry Thoreau and young Horace Mann Jr. traveled on during their month in Minnesota. Here, though, the paddlers trace the route backwards. They go down the Minnesota River and then up the Mississippi. Kind of disconcerting when you're used to going the other way. But you see what there is to see there now, and speculate what was there back when they were there. Interestingly enough, David did not use my book, Westward I Go Free, as a resource. Okay. A Week on the Minnesota and Mississippi Rivers. If you want to follow in Thoreau's footsteps, as some of us like to do. Now, when you think of a photographer who has followed in Thoreau's footsteps, somebody from the past, somebody from the turn of the last century who went where Thoreau went and took lovely black and white photographs, you may think, of course, of Herbert W. Gleason. His photographs from the turn of the last century can be found in copies, reprints of Thoreau's books, as well as in his own book, Thoreau Country, usually easily accessible at any used bookstore in paperback or hardback. And then there's also Dale Schwee's biography of Gleason, Taking Sides with the Sun, that came out a few years ago. So if you are a Thoreau fan, you probably have seen Gleason's photographs and know the name. But if you live in Maine, you may know of another photographer who went around in Maine and did something similar to what Gleason did in other places. And that man's name is Bert Lincoln Call, C-A-L-L. And in the 19-teens and in the 1920s, he traveled around Maine took amazing black and white landscape photographs, including places related to Thoreau's own trips to the state. And the University of Maine Press has published Henry David Thoreau, Bert Call, and the Maine Woods, with photographs by Bert Call, quotes by Henry, and introductions by Mark Albert and Todd Watts. And it's a coffee table book size, obviously, and double page spreads with photographs and quotes. See if I can get the one I marked. This is and the Maine, you gotta love the Maine place names. Pockwockomus Falls, 1915. There's a picture. Katahdin in the back. Can you see Katahdin in the back? Yeah. And a quote from Thoreau about the falls. I mean, yes. So if you love Maine, if you love black and white photographs, if you love quote books about Thoreau, this is a great one. Bert Call lived from 1866 to 1965. He also, the people who compiled this made it kind of like a travel log through the Maine woods, okay? It's a beautiful book showing most of us views that we've never had, especially if we've never climbed Katahdin or explored the Maine woods for ourselves. So that's Henry David Thoreau, Bert Call, and the Maine Woods from the University of Maine Press. Thank you, Mainers. Okay, a nifty little book by the Bear and Bee Bookshop in North Adams, Massachusetts is called An Ocean of Mist, Thoreau on Greylock. Okay, I don't have a copy of it. It's about that big. It's a skinny little white paperback published by the Bear and Bee Bookshop in North Adams. You know, North Adams lies right above, it's at the northern edge of Greylock in western Massachusetts. And they created this paperback of combining Thoreau's talk about climbing Saddleback or Greylock in the Tuesday chapter of A Week on the Concord and Merrimack Rivers. They put that compiled with part of the conclusion from Walden. So it's a nifty little memento book from western Massachusetts about Thoreau's relationship with Greylock and his own interpretation of things. It's a cool little book. I don't have a copy of it right now. I've reached out to the bookshop. We used to sell it at the shop and we ran out, and they are thinking about reprinting it, but they're looking for more copies right now. So I'm not sure if you're going to be able to get one, but it's from the Bear and Bee Bookshop in North Adams, An Ocean of Mist. Cute little book. They also used to sell it at the gift shop at Mass Mocha. If you know what Mass Mocha is, you might want to reach out to them. They might have some. Now, moving on. We've got about 6 books of literary analysis. I'm going to call it literary analysis or Thoreauvian analysis. And no, I have not read any of them. I'll tell you why. I'm at the point in my life where I am comfortable with the way I know and the way I interpret Henry and his life and his writings and his philosophies. And I don't really want or need anyone else to disturb this with their opinions and analysis. Now that might sound selfish, but you know, who has the time to read all of this stuff? Maybe you guys do. Maybe you guys do. So I'm just going to read to you on the backs and on the flaps of what these books are supposed to be, and then you guys can read them and you can tell me if that's what they really do. We're going to go in alphabetical order by author. So there's 6 of these books. First up is Thoreau, The Naturalist as a Field Ornithologist, whoa, by Gordon Anderson. Sometimes they jump. Gordon lives in Minnesota. And he makes the point, you know, back in the day, Thoreau's day, they didn't have beautiful illustrated color photograph guidebooks or really good descriptions of birds. They didn't have apps with bird calls on them. So you had to be really paying attention to the birds out there so that you could see all that kind of stuff for yourself and make up your own judgment of what kind of bird it was. So Thoreau's resources were limited, okay? So here it says, In the mid-19th century, while Thoreau was studying birds, American ornithology was a fledgling discipline. A fledgling discipline, get it? And the most complete and authoritative works were rife with omissions and misidentifications. Here, this book provides a welcome and informative survey of many of the issues confronting a self-taught ornithologist during this period, along with a deep dive into some of Thoreau's thorniest identification problems and solutions. Of special interest is the examination of Thoreau's last significant exploration of new birds during his 1861 journey to Minnesota. So that's what you're going to find here. And so it's not just quotes, although Gordon reacts to quotes. If you want a quote book, you look at that Year of Birds, okay? If you want to know more about Thoreau, really, as an ornithologist, you can read the Year of Birds Introduction by Peter Alden, Gordon Anderson's Thoreau, the Naturalist as Ornithologist. All right. Moving on, then we have The Gospel of This Moment, The Spiritual Message of Henry David Thoreau by Barry Andrews. Barry has been a prolific studier and author of both Emerson and Thoreau's spirituality, interpretations, all kinds of things. I don't even remember how many books Barry has given us, but he's quite regular with options here. This is his most recent work, Gospel of This Moment. So this says, here, Unitarian minister Barry M. Andrews reveals how an idiosyncratic and unconventional religious faith was central to Thoreau's many-faceted life, a dimension that has been largely unexamined. Through close readings of his writings and a focus on his Unitarian upbringing, Harvard education, mentoring by Ralph Waldo Emerson, and immersion in ancient Eastern and Western philosophies, Andrews explores the nature of Thoreau's spiritual message, what he calls the gospel according to this moment, which enables a flourishing and deliberate life. As Andrew uncovers, Thoreau is also a spiritual guide who can teach us an alternative way of being religious in the world. So that's the Gospel of This Moment by Unitarian minister Barry M. Andrews. Next up, going in alphabetical order by author, Mindprints, Thoreau's Material Worlds by Ivan Gaskell. And this, though we may associate Thoreau with aesthetic renunciation, he accumulated a variety of tools, art, and natural specimens throughout his life as a home builder, a surveyor, and a collector. In some of these objects, particularly indigenous artifacts, Thoreau perceived the presence of their original makers, and he called such objects mindprints. He believed that these collections could teach him how his experience, his world, fit into the wider, more diverse assemblage of other worlds created and recreated by other beings every day. This book explores how a profound environmental aesthetics developed from this insight and shaped Thoreau's broader thought, being influenced by the items that you surround yourself with, folks. Mindprints by Ivan Gaskell. Next up, Richard Higgins, Thoreau's God, which just recently came out. Rich Higgins, by the way, if you remember, gave us Thoreau in the Language of Trees with a beautiful green cover. And now we've got Thoreau's God. Okay, Thoreau's spiritual life is a riddle. His passionate critique of formal religion is matched only by his rapturous descriptions of encounters with the divine in nature. He fled the church only to pursue a deeper communion with a presence he felt at the heart of the universe. He called this presence many names, but he often called it God. In this book, Higgins invites seekers, religious or otherwise, to walk with the great transcendentalist through a series of meditations on his spiritual life. Thoreau offers us no creed, but his writings encourage reflection on how to live, what to notice, and what to love. Though his quest was deeply personal, Thoreau devoted his life to communicating his experience of an infinite, wild, life-giving God. By recovering this vital thread in Thoreau's life and work, this book opens the door to a new understanding of an original voice in American religion that speaks to the spiritual seekers today. So, got 2 books about Thoreau's aspects of his own personal religion. How do they interact? How do they overlap? I don't know. I didn't read them. You tell me. I've heard both men speak, and both know what they're talking about, and both do a great job at conveying their message when they're speaking. I'm assuming that they're both renowned authors. So, anyway, it would be nice to compare them. Sorry, I didn't have time to read both of them to compare. But like I said, I did go to the programs that they had about their books, and they do approach the topic from slightly different positions. Anyway, okay, so you got the Gospel of This Moment, you have Mindprints, you got Thoreau's God, and then we come up to Not Till We Are Lost, Thoreau, Education and Climate Crisis by William Homestead. Again, another book published by Mercer University Press. This one sounds challenging to describe. William uses his experiences in the classroom and what he labels as students who are lost or found. And he weaves attention to the climate crisis into this mix of what students are trying to think of and how the climate crisis is with that. Now let me read part of the back here. Striving to figure out how to guide lost students and help those who believe they are found, Homestead ruminates on the unfolding of his inner life, including his own struggles with formal schooling and the game of grading. He also turns to the writings of Thoreau, who turned within and discovered the blessings of being lost. This book posits that the climate crisis is ultimately a spiritual crisis, calling us to reset the compass. Humanity is called by inner intelligence in sympathy with ecosystem intelligence, and still further, the soul of the world. As Thoreau modeled, such deep listening and then acting on what we learn is the deeper measure of being educated. Lest we lead lives of quiet desperation, we desperately need an educational system that mirrors this reality, embracing the infinite extent of our relations. How many Thoreau quotes are woven into that one summary? Did you count them? Anyway, sounds interesting. William Homestead, and now, no, not till we are lost, which is another Thoreau quote. Hint to budding authors out there. Look for a Thoreau quote that you can make as the title of your book. Speaking as someone who did that themselves. Okay. Next up, we have John Cusick and Unsettling Thoreau, Native American Settler Colonialism and the Power of Place by John Cusick, who is the current president of the Thoreau Society. So, Thoreau's lifelong fascination with Native Americans has been a recurring topic of interest. It's also a source of modern debate. John charges into the contradiction of Thoreau, considering how he could demonstrate deep respect for this group on one hand and remain largely silent about their genocide on the other. Thoreau's long study of native peoples, its reflection in his writing, allowed him to glimpse an indigenous worldview, but it never fully freed him from the blind spots of settler colonialism. So this book explores the stakes of Thoreau's effort to live mindfully and ethically in place when living alongside or replacing marginalized people. By examining the whole scope of his published and unpublished writings and placing them alongside Native writers and communities, this book gauges Thoreau's effort to use indigenous knowledge to reimagine a settler colonial world without removing him from its trappings. So if you're interested in Thoreau's relationship and interest and obsession in some cases with Native American culture, there you go. Unsettling Thoreau by John Cusick. Right. Now, so there we had fiction books, quote book, following in the footsteps, and then these literary analysis books. Now, some people did self-publish books this year. Some of them I have seen in person, and can tell you, I can tell you where to find more information about them. So one is a book by Mary Ann Smers called Paddling with Thoreau, Reflections from the Red Kayak. Mary Ann lives in Wisconsin, and this is one of her books where she talks about her interest and her inspiration taken from Thoreau, especially when she is kayaking in her red kayak. And so you can find her and her books at redkayak.net. Another self-published book this year is A Mystical Friendship, My Year with Henry David Thoreau, written by Cynthia Fraser Graves. And Cynthia lives in Maine, and she took a year where she wrote letters to Henry and evidently got some replies. Okay? You can find her at cynthiafrasergraves.com or look up Androscoggin Press. Gotta love those Maine names and the native Maine names. Now, okay, so we went through the cycle here. That's everything that came out, as far as I know, this year, or that came to my attention this year. If you have published a book this year and I missed it, please write in the comments. Let me know. Let everybody know. What do we know about 2025? Except that that's a really big number to those of us who were born in the middle of the 20th century. Anyway, in May, we are going to get Finding Your Walden, How to Strive Less, Simplify More, and Embrace What Matters Most by Jen Tota McGivney. Jen lives in North Carolina. This is her first published book. It's a self-help kind of book with a Thoreau and Walden theme. I have a feeling it's going to get a lot of publicity and you're going to hear a lot about it. It doesn't come out until May. But in some online venues, you can already order it. And also, according to information gleaned from Publishers Weekly, Mercer University Press, again, a big friend to Thoreau people now, is going to publish sometime in 2025, but they don't have it on their website yet. And it's this book here. It's this book, and it's going to look like that. It's Henry David Thoreau and the Nick of Time, Temporality and Agency in Thoreau's Era and Ours. And it's a collection of the essays of the talks that were given in 2022 at the conference held in Iceland, the Thoreauvian Conference held in Iceland, 2022. This is a conference book of the talks that were given then. If you didn't attend the conference, see, you can just wait for this book to come out, then you'll read everything that everybody said. So that's cool. Also, in the works, Jeff Wisner of Thoreau's Animals, Thoreau's Wildflowers, and A Year of Birds is working on another book with Mercer University Press in this kind of format, paying attention to what Thoreau's quotes were about the forest floor. And we're talking about mosses and lichens and anything that's anything that's on the forest floor, mushrooms and fungi and stuff like that. I haven't heard a timeline for its release. I've just heard that Jeff is working on it. I met the illustrator, whose name defies me. It's not any of the illustrators that he used before. So for this one, given the success of A Year of Birds, I have a feeling the forest floor book is going to do well also. Okay, enough said. Again, if you know of another book that I didn't mention, you published one yourself, wrote one yourself, please let us know. Otherwise, the study of Thoreau never ends. That's what we learn here. It never ends. There's always going to be an annual review. Anyway, thanks a lot for watching. My name's Corinne Smith. Now don't you have a lot of reading to do?